Chernobyl, one of the largest and the most famous accidents of the 20th century. Almost everyone knows about it, or at least heard about it, but practically no one heard that another, no less serious catastrophe had nearly happened a year before, and not somewhere, but in a not so far away space. What does the word salute tell you? For some it is a greeting, for some it is associated with a holiday, but for others it is an exploit.
The Salyut-7 orbital space station stopped responding to signals from the Mission Control Center on February 11, 1985, at 9:23 Moscow time. The station, which by that time had no people for 6 months, got out of control and gradually began to approach the Earth. Many human lives and the reputation of the entire Soviet cosmonautics were under threat.
Salyut-7 is a Soviet orbital space station created under the long-term orbital station program, and the seventh in a series of Salyut stations. The series of stations has a total of 15 vehicles, 4 of which were civilian stations, 3 for military purposes, 2 were unmanned, 1 served as the base unit of the Mir station, 1 more still serves as the base unit of the ISS, and 4 have not been deployed to the orbit. The Salyut-7 station was launched into orbit on April 19, 1982 by the Proton launch vehicle, and at that time became the only station in the Earth orbit. It hosted 6 prime crews and 5 visiting expeditions. The longest expedition to the station lasted 237 days, and a total of 21 people visited it.
Under the Intercosmos program, the station was visited by the first Indian cosmonaut Rocket Sharma and Jean-Luc Chrétien, the first French citizen who fly into space on the Soviet Soyuz-T6 spacecraft and the Salyut-7 orbital station. Svetlana Savitskaya, the world's second female cosmonaut after Valentina Tereshkova, also worked at the station. She became the world's first female astronaut to walk into outer space.
As a result of the rash actions of the specialists in the MCC, in an emergency situation on February 11, 1985, the antennas and control of the station were broken down, and communication with the station was completely lost. At Salyut itself, as it turned out, there was a short circuit of the entire power grid, and the solar panels could no longer provide the station with electricity. Therefore, the station's batteries were quickly discharged, and as a result the temperature control system failed, and the station began to freeze slowly. As some people were going to say later, the station turned into a flying cobblestone, slowly falling on the heads of the inhabitants of the planet. At the same time, on the other side of the world, in the United States, at the launch site of Cape Canaveral, the Challenger shuttle was being prepared for launch. The shuttle cargo compartment allowed the Salyut-7 station to be fully accommodated. The rush in which the shuttle was launched pushed the Soviet leadership into paranoid thoughts. Are the Americans really going to steal our station from the orbit? Sources differ. Whether the West learned about the problems at the Soviet station and decided on an attempted robbery in space, or whether they learned about the problems of Salyut-7 after the official statement of the USSR. The main thing we know for sure, there was no written evidence of Salyut's abduction. but many can confirm that rapprochement of the shuttle with Salyut took place.
Almost immediately after Moscow learned about the malfunctions at the station, an emergency meeting of the chief engineers and the country leadership was held, and the only possible decision was made: the station must be rescued. There was also the condition: the commander of the ship must choose the flight engineer himself. The ballistic forecast was a good news for everyone. 179 days before uncontrolled entry in the atmosphere, without 4 days, 6 months, half a year. This period is enough to assemble and to train a rescue crew.
Janibekov chose Viktor-7 as the flight engineer.
Vladimir Janibekov is one of the most experienced Russian cosmonauts. He has made 5 space flights and 2 spacewalks. During all his flights, he led the crews of spaceships.
During the flight to the station, Vladimir Janibekov discovered a previously unobserved effect of the rotation of bodies in zero gravity. The node in the station's cabin periodically turned randomly by 180 degrees and changed the direction of movement. The effect was named after him, but was classified in the Soviet Union. Viktor-7 has been the 50th cosmonaut of the Soviet Union and the 100th man in orbit. Twice the hero of the Soviet Union made the most difficult flight in the history of Soviet space, and together with Vladimir Janibekov volunteered to save the Salyut-7 station from a crash. The rescue operation of the Salyut-7 is described in details by Viktor-7 in his book Notes from a Dead Station. TASS report. On June 6, 1985, at 10 hours 48 minutes Moscow time, the Soyuz T-13 spacecraft was launched in the Soviet Union.
Soyuz is a family of Soviet and Russian multi-seat manned spacecraft designed to deliver crews of up to 3 people to near-Earth orbit. Its development began in 1962, and the first flight took place on April 23, 1967. The ship is 8 meters long and 2.5 meters in diameter. There were 8 modifications of the spacecraft, the newest of which, the Soyuz MS, is still used by Russia.
Pamir, that was their call sign, faced one of the most difficult missions in the entire history of the conquest of space by man. No one before them and no one after them docked manually, without automatic systems, with an uncontrollable object in space, a dead space station.
The Soyuz T-13 was not a regular ship. Unlike all other ships, it had to approach the station not with a bow with a docking station, but sideways, so that it could observe the station through the window and use a laser rangefinder. This rangefinder was just invented for military purposes, and this, in fact, was its test.
Docking to an unmanned station isn't actually difficult. The problem was that the Salyut radio transmitters were silent, and the station could not transmit information about its position in space. But even on the third orbit, Soviet air defense forces detected the dead Salyut and tracked it, so approximate location of the station was known.
On the second day of the flight, Salyut-7 appeared in the window. As soon as the station approached, it became clear. The orientation system of the solar panels was faulty, which means that there were problems in the entire power grid. But the worst thing was that the station's docking port was turned towards the Earth. And, naturally, there was no way to prepare the Salyut for the approaching ship. When the station was 4 kilometers away, Genebekov put the Soyuz T-13 into manual control mode. 200 meters before the station, the ship began flying around it to approach the docking port of the station.
The docking was successful, but the most difficult part of the mission for the cosmonauts was just beginning. They had to revive the station. The worst thing that could happen to Salyut was its depressurization. The oxygen that was in the Soyuz would not have been enough for the entire station, and work on it would have been impossible. In addition, it threatened to cause the death of cosmonauts. After several terrible minutes of opening the hatches, it turned out that everything was fine. There was oxygen at the station. One problem less.
The air temperature was -5 below zero. The frozen water in the pipes tore them apart, and the walls were covered with frost. The reason for this was the failed orientation system of the solar panels. The station was completely cut off.
Kalatun, brothers!
First of all, the cosmonauts began to warm up the station. They opened the windows and turned it towards the sun with help of the Soyuz engines. At the MCC, the cosmonauts were allowed to work on Salyut no more than 8 hours a day, with breaks, and only one at a time. The another cosmonaut had to stay on the ship and control his partner from there.
The cosmonauts had to forget about the trivial conveniences. It was not possible to warm up the food at the station. Tea and coffee were first heated under the arm, then under the illumination lamp on the ship. They could only dream of washing. They had to save water.
A couple of days later, the cosmonauts went on air. The MCC promptly asked them to breathe and were satisfied. The steam from the mouth was not visible. During the broadcast, Savinik and Genebekov had to take off their warm stripped hats, which were taken from the home. On Earth, it was still reported that the flight was proceeding normally. On the same day, the astronauts were able to connect the station's batteries by connecting them directly to the solar panels. They twisted electrical wires with their bare hands and wrapped them with electrical tape. and so 16 times. The next day, they turned on part of the lighting, connected air regenerators, and warmed up canned food and bread.
The station began to come to life.
But with the above zero temperature, new problems came as well. The ice that covered almost the entire station from the inside began to melt, threatening to damage part of the newly restored electronics and finally destroy the station. Water seeped from everywhere, and the walls were covered with a thin layer forming a film. As the cosmonauts later recalled, it was worth hitting something and sprays scattered in all directions.
And then the racks went into action. Centimeter by centimeter, Genebekov and Savynych fought with water at this station, carefully wiped every element, every corner at this station. But there were not enough racks, and even clothes were used up. During each communication session, the cosmonauts asked for only one thing: racks or towels. "We need racks, just don't forget the racks." On June 23, the Progress cargo ship built on the base of the Soyuz docked with the Salyut-7 space station. The cargo ship brought equipment, fuel, water supplies, as well as several issues of the Pravda newspaper. There was no need to worry about resources anymore.
The cosmonauts began to prepare for spacewalk and the installation of the additional sections of solar panels. Those that were at the station over the years on orbit lost their effectiveness under impact of micrometeorites. On the 2nd of August, Vladimir Genebekov and Viktor Savynych carried out this operation. And again, there was a mini problem. When the panels were deployed, the cable got stuck. After a while, the cable was released, and the solar panels were replaced.
In addition to restoring the station, the cosmonauts were also engaged in scientific work on the Salyut. They carried out experiments, conducted observations, and grew cotton and pepper. So 100 days were passed, allowed by doctors to Vladimir Genebekov on the expedition. This was his last flight. On September 18, Soyuz T-14 moored to the station with Georgy Grechko, Vladimir Vasyutin, and Alexander Volkov on board.
On September 26, Vladimir Genebekov and Georgy Grechko returned to the Earth. Savynych, Vasyutin, and Volkov continued to work in the orbit. Salyut-7 hosted another expedition the following year. Soyuz T-15, consisting of Leonid Kizim and Vladimir Solovyov, flew from one station to another for the first time in the world. Their ship undocked from the Mir station and docked with the Salyut-7 station. Having completed all the experiments, including in open space, they took some equipment, mothballed the Salyut, and returned to the Mir station. This was the first expedition for the Mir station and the last one for the Salyut-7 space station.
(1990) was a year of high solar activity and the compaction of the upper atmosphere. The station again began to descend uncontrollably. The flying fragments should not have caused serious damage. On the night of February 6 to 7, 1999, at a speed over 30,000 km per hour, the orbital station entered the Earth's atmosphere and almost completely burned out. And by the end of this year, the Soviet Union, the country that first sent man into space, was gone. This is how one story ended and another began.
But history is alive as long as there are those who remember it, and there are two living on Earth who played the main role in it.
Currently, Dženibekov is engaged in art, paints pictures, experimenting in approaches to creativity. On the occasion of the 60th anniversary of Yuri Gagarin's flight into space, an exhibition of Vladimir's paintings was opened in Star City, which included both space and terrestrial landscapes. In addition to paintings, Dženibekov is the author of sketches for Soviet and American postage stamps. Also, under the leadership of Vladimir, a special wristwatch was invented that monitors human biorhythms and is used by astronauts to determine their location.
But Viktor Savinych is engaged in writing. In his portfolio you can find such books about space as Earth Weights and Hopes, News from a Dead Station, Geography from Space, and Vyatka Baikonur Space. For his work, he received membership of Writers' Union, and now he is actively involved in political activities.